The early morning light, still timid and diffused, cast long shadows across the humble path as the creditors approached, shattered the fragile peace of the small rural home. Hang's mother, a woman etched with the lines of relentless toil and quiet hopes, felt a tremor of fear seize her, a familiar chill that had become her unwelcome companion in recent days. The sound of his voice, low and insistent, resonated with the weight of her unspoken anxieties, each syllable a reminder of a promise she could not keep. Just days ago, an exchange had taken place under the guise of neighborly trust, a common currency in communities where formal banks felt distant and impersonal. "Uncle, can I borrow money?" Her voice, then, had been tinged with a desperate optimism, a fervent belief in a swift turnaround. "After borrowing it from you, in 2 days, I will repay the principal and interest." The words had flowed easily, a script rehearsed in her mind, convincing herself as much as her lender. Uncle Tien, a man known for his stern demeanor but also for his occasional acts of kindness, had relented, the promise of quick returns a sweet temptation for anyone navigating the precarious balance of village economics. Now, 2 days had stretched into 7, then 8, each passing sun intensifying the shadows in her heart. The daughter, Hang, observant and deeply attuned to her mother's unspoken distress, saw the creditor's arrival from afar. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had been trying to reach the friend, the architect of their financial ruin, the one who had spun tales of unimaginable wealth, but his phone was dead, a silence more terrifying than any accusation. "Uncle, take it slow." "Oh, Uncle? Uncle, Uncle," she called out, a desperate plea to halt the inevitable confrontation, to buy just a few more moments of reprieve from the impending storm. The creditor, however, was not to be deterred. His strides were purposeful, his gaze fixed on the front door, a symbol of their dwindling options. Hang had tried the number again, her thumb hovering over the familiar digits, a gesture of futile hope. "Blocked the number?" "Yes." The metallic voice confirming the blocked line felt like a personal affront, a deliberate act of betrayal. "Oh, blocking the number like that probably won't work," she muttered to herself, the practical side of her mind wrestling with the emotional turmoil. The friend's house, which they had visited countless times with dreams of a prosperous future, now stood silent and unresponsive. Lock the door like this or hide? I don't know either. A wave of uncertainty washed over her. Let me try to call. How can I get the money for Mom? Dung? Her brother, Tung, was out of reach, perhaps the only one still living in a world untainted by their current despair. She considered forcing the door, to somehow find an answer, a sign, anything to explain the sudden disappearance. But the door was secured, a robust lock mocking her attempts. Or let me open the door and see. It's locked. The door is locked, son. Oh, so he is not home. Or did he run away from debt? The questions spun in her head, each answer more devastating than the last. I don't know either. He probably ran away from debt and then locked the door. The grim reality began to settle, a heavy blanket of dread suffocating any lingering optimism. This wasn't a temporary setback, this was a deliberate act, a calculated deception that had stripped them bare. The cultural shame of debt, especially one incurred through such a gullible venture, was a heavy cross to bear. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the family's reputation, their standing in the community, the quiet dignity they had always strived to maintain. A cold dread tightened around Hang, a physical manifestation of her mother's silent despair. What could she do? Her mind raced, a frantic search for solutions in a landscape devoid of hope. Mom is so worried, she murmured, words feeling utterly inadequate to capture the abyss of their predicament. I'm worried too. Her first instinct was to call the friend, the supposed architect of their prosperity. But the dial tone was met with an immediate, unyielding silence. He had blocked her number, severing their last fragile link to a vanished fortune. The digital barrier felt like a concrete wall, sealing them into their misfortune. What should I do now? The question hung heavy, unanswered, suffocating. I have to quickly get the money back for Mom. Otherwise, it won't work. A deep-seated anxiety gnawed at her, the looming presence of Hang, her younger brother, whose innocence they desperately sought to shield from this harsh reality. We can't hide it from our son for long. The burden of their secret, already heavy, threatened to crush them. In a society where family reputation and stability were paramount, such a loss could unravel everything. The cultural weight of their predicament was immense. Failure was not just personal but a reflection on the entire lineage. This was not merely about money, it was about dignity, about the future, about their very place within the fabric of their community. As the gravity of the situation pressed down, a new, more insidious thought began to form in Hang's mind, chilling her to the bone. What should I do? I don't know. Or did you and he collude to cheat Mom's money? The accusation, though unspoken aloud, hung heavy in the air between mother and daughter. It was a desperate thought, born of panic, but the seed of doubt, once planted, was hard to uproot. The mother, her face ashen, could only shake her head, a silent denial that carried the weight of profound regret. No, I don't know either. At first, he also told me to invest 10 million like Mom. Her voice was a fragile whisper, recounting a story of insidious manipulation. The friend had been patient, building trust, showing initial small profits, a classic bait and switch. After making a profit, it kept luring me to continue investing. After I had 200 or 300 million, I continued investing. Now it has taken all my money. The confession was a raw wound, a testament to the cunning of the scammer who preyed on ambition and the human desire for a better life. The memory of her mother's initial caution resurfaced, a bitter irony in their current despair. At first, my mother also told me that we should invest gradually, only invest a little, so I told her to sell the house to invest in it, but now I can't get it. Where will I get a house? The daughter's words were laced with a self-recrimination so sharp it felt like a physical blow. The house, their ancestral home, a symbol of their heritage and security, was gone, traded for an illusion. This was more than just a financial loss, it was a profound displacement, a severing of ties to their past and a shattering of their future. In their culture, land and home were not mere assets, they were anchors, identity. To lose it, especially through such folly, was catastrophic. If I wait too long, won't my son know? I must have been tricked, so I tricked my mother like that. The daughter's voice cracked, the realization a crushing weight. She had, inadvertently, become an instrument of the scam, leading her trusting mother down a path of ruin. Her mother, sensing the daughter's self-blame, tried to piece together the beginnings of their downfall. At first, when we started doing business together, my friend asked me how to invest. He also told me to borrow 10 million to invest. After a few times, I said I wouldn't invest anymore. The initial skepticism, the faint alarm bells, had been silenced by the promise of easy money. Then he told me to go home and tell my family or someone else to invest. Then I came home to find my mother. If I said that, I was tricked. The daughter's voice trailed off, the admission of being tricked a bitter pill. It painted a picture of a carefully constructed deception, where the scammer leveraged existing relationships, turning family against family in an intricate web of deceit. This was not just a random con, it was a sophisticated psychological operation, targeting vulnerability and trust. It must not be true. Before, my mother invested 10 million and got a profit of 30 million. It's not true. The daughter clung to this detail, a desperate search for logical flaws in their nightmare. The initial profit had been the bait, A carefully orchestrated illusion of success designed to entice deeper commitment. The scammer had cultivated an image of a prosperous future, weaving dreams of early retirement, of providing abundantly for children and grandchildren, all deeply resonant cultural aspirations. Why not? If I wasn't tricked, why wouldn't I stay here? He closed the shop and left. The cold, hard fact of the empty premises, the vanished friend, spoke louder than any denial. As for yours, I also invested in it. Mom, why didn't you sell the house to invest in it? Didn't you take all the money and run away? The daughter's questions tumbled out, an agonizing mix of accusation and desperate confusion. Her mother's response was a heart-wrenching sob, a raw admission of utter defeat. Oh, I was scammed, my child. I was scammed, I lost all my money, my child. The weight of the words hung in the air, a final, undeniable verdict. The reality of their penniless state began to sink in, not as an abstract concept, but as a visceral, gut-wrenching pain. Where will I get the money now? I've lost it all now, my child? Her mother's voice was a mere whisper, trembling with despair. Her frail body swayed, the strength draining from her limbs. I don't know either. Mom, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Let me sit down here. Hang rushed to support her mother, guiding her to a low stool, her touch gentle but urgent. The mother's breath grew shallow, her chest heaving with desperate gasps. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Mom? Mom, I can't breathe, I probably can't live. The fear was palpable, radiating from her mother's trembling form. This was more than just financial ruin, it was a threat to life itself. The shame, the stress, the sudden collapse of all future hopes had manifested as a physical affliction, a heart attack born of overwhelming grief and despair. Oh, calm down, don't think too much. I'm going to die. I can't breathe. Hang tried to soothe her, but her own voice was strained, thick with rising panic. The cultural emphasis on emotional resilience often clashed with the harsh realities of profound loss, leaving individuals vulnerable to such catastrophic health crises. Now we've been scammed. I've been scammed out of all my money, my child. The words were wrung from her mother, each syllable heavy with anguish. My heart is so bad I can't breathe, my child. If he really scammed all my money like this, I can't live, my child. The desperation was absolute, a chilling glimpse into the depths of a mother's suffering, a life irrevocably shattered. Hang, despite her own terror, tried to project a calm she didn't feel. Mom, now I'm sitting here waiting for him to come back to get the money. I can only come back when I get the money. It's probably okay, Mom. It was a futile hope, a child's desperate attempt to mend a broken world, yet it was all she had to offer her fading mother. The belief that simply waiting would somehow make things right was a testament to their deep-seated trust, even in the face of such blatant betrayal. This was a classic victim response, a refusal to believe in the finality of the deception, clinging to the slim chance of reversal. Her mother, however, was past the point of passive hope. The instinct for survival, for protecting her child's future, surged through her weakened body. Right now, you can't just sit here like this, Mom. You can't live. If my son finds out about losing this money, how will I live? The thought of her younger son, Hang, discovering their calamity was an unbearable prospect, a stain on her reputation she couldn't contemplate. Now you take me home first. Then slowly let me find a way to meet my friend to get that money back. The plea was urgent, tinged with a desperate, almost irrational, determination. Slowly, when will I get the money? Then wait until I find a way to meet him, then we can get the money back, Mom. It can't be lost. Hang tried to reason, to offer a glimmer of hope that defied all logic. The idea of the money being lost was too final, too devastating for her mother to accept. In their minds, this was a temporary misplacement, a recoverable error, rather than a permanent void. My friend probably can't take it away either. Hang clung to the belief that the scammer, her friend, might still be reachable, perhaps just hiding temporarily. Now we can't sit here. What else had we been fooled about? Now we're making a big deal out of it. What if Mr. Hang finds out? The constant threat of exposure, particularly to the wider community and to her son-in-law, was a torment worse than the financial ruin itself. The shame would be unbearable. Now you take me home first. Her mother insisted, her voice gaining a fragile strength born of sheer desperation. Okay, that's fine, but you have to be quick. Fast. Yes. Find the money back no matter what. Yes. You were fooled, my child. You were fooled. The daughter's assurances were thin, fragile veneers over a churning fear, but she knew she had to offer some semblance of comfort. It's okay, Mom. I know his house. If he cheated my money, I'll come back here and take his house. Hang's words were a raw expression of anger and frustration, a fleeting fantasy of retributive justice in a world that had suddenly become profoundly unfair. This desire for direct action, bypassing formal legal channels, was often a response in communities where trust was personal and justice felt immediate. What can I do? You were fooled too. I was fooled too. He fooled me so many times, I'm going to die. I don't know what to do. Her mother's despair was absolute, her spirit broken. Honey, rest a bit. Mom is so tired, I can't go. Mom will sit here for a while. Her mother, slumped and exhausted, found respite on a dusty roadside, her body a testament to the immense psychological and physical toll of her ordeal. The relentless tropical sun beat down, intensifying her fatigue, mirroring the merciless pressure on her mind. The exhaustion was bone deep, a heavy cloak that seemed to adhere to her mother's frail frame. I'm so tired, I can't go. The words were barely audible, a ragged whisper escaping her lips. Hang looked at her mother, her own stomach rumbling with hunger, a stark reminder of their immediate, desperate circumstances. Why didn't you hire a motorbike taxi this morning? The question was rhetorical, a lament of their current poverty. You're out of money too, you don't have any money left. The harsh truth was undeniable, every last dong, every last shred of their savings, had been swallowed by the deceit. Just walking like this, you can't go any further, you're so weak. The daughter's voice was tinged with worry, observing her mother's faltering steps, her shoulders stooped under an invisible burden. I'm hungry too. A simple statement, yet it carried the weight of their current plight. The primal ache of hunger brought with it a wave of regret, a poignant memory of a different, more abundant time. Now that I'm hungry, I think about yesterday when I threw away that chicken thigh. What a pity. The image of a discarded chicken thigh, a symbol of casual plenty, now haunted her mother's thoughts. It was a stark measure of their fall, from a world where food was taken for granted to one where even scraps held unimaginable value. This anecdote, seemingly trivial, painted a vivid picture of their descent into destitution, emphasizing the immediate, physical consequences of their financial ruin. If I had known, I would have picked it up and brought it home to eat. Now I'm poor, I have no money. I have nothing, what can I eat, baby? Her mother's lament was a mournful dirge, a reflection of utter hopelessness. The daughter, her own stomach churning, could only recall the overwhelming stress of that moment. At that time, how could I have the mood to take that chicken thigh home to eat, Mom? The psychological burden had been too immense, the mind preoccupied with the phantom millions, unable to register the simple, tangible value of a meal. Now I don't even have anything to eat. I even threw away the chicken thigh. The irony was cruel, a bitter twist of fate that mocked their previous aspirations. A deep sigh escaped her mother's lips, heavy with regret and a sense of cosmic injustice. Mom thought she would get a lot of money, but now she's lost it all. The ancestors probably won't bless me. It's so miserable. The invocation of ancestors underscored the cultural significance of prosperity and well-being. To fail so spectacularly was not just a personal failing but a perceived rejection by the spirits, a deep spiritual wound. Now I have nothing to eat. If I had known, I wouldn't have invested anymore. With that money, I would have changed my life. The haunting specter of what might have been, the dreams of a secure future, now lay in ruins. The daughter, burdened by guilt, could only remember her mother's initial, sound advice. Mom said we should just invest it gradually, but you insisted that Mom sell the house and invest it. Now where do I get it? I don't have any money. The daughter's self-reproach was profound, a direct confession of her role in their shared tragedy. Last time if I had left it, it would have been enough for me to eat. I didn't expect it to be like this. Her mother's voice was tinged with sorrow, a quiet lament for a past she could not reclaim. I didn't expect it, but you kept telling me to invest a lot. The more I invest, the better. Now where do I get money to eat, my child? The cycle of blame, though subdued, continued to circle, a heavy burden on both their hearts. I don't know it will be like this. Let's not talk about it anymore. Talking about it makes my heart ache. The conversation became too painful, the raw wound of their loss too fresh to poke and prod. The sheer ignorance surrounding their supposed investment was staggering, a testament to the scammer's ability to blind them with promises. At that time, I just took money to let people invest, but I didn't know what they invested in. Now they don't know what they invested in. Her mother confessed, her voice filled with bewilderment. They had simply handed over their life savings, trusting implicitly in a system they didn't understand, seduced by the fantasy of passive income. I just stayed home and waited for the money. Now it's all gone. What should I do? The realization hit with the force of a physical blow. They had invested in thin air, in a phantom enterprise that existed only in the scammer's deceitful narratives. The daughter then revisited a crucial detail, one that now took on a terrifying new significance. I went to that house a while ago and I didn't know if it was really my nephew's house. I thought it was my friend's house. The initial description of the friend's house had been vague, a mere pointer, a quick glance. I saw my friend point to it as his house, but I haven't been able to go in yet. What? You don't know where his house is? The daughter's disbelief was stark. Isn't it his house? If you haven't been able to go in yet, it's not his house. You've been fooled, my child. The words struck like lightning, a brutal clarification of the final, most devastating layer of deceit. Not only had they lost their money, but the very location of their investor was a lie. Oh no, this isn't his house, my child. You've been fooled. Her mother's voice was a choked cry, the last vestiges of her hope crumbling into dust. Mom, calm down. My child. You've killed me. If I was tricked like that, I'll kill you too. The mother's desperate anguish erupted into a terrifying outburst, a raw expression of suicidal despair, lashing out at the daughter in her profound torment. The weight of betrayal, of losing everything, pushed her to the brink of collapse. I can't breathe. Her mother's words were barely a gasp, her body racked with pain and terror. Mom, calm down. Hank tried to console her, her own voice trembling. She looked around, at the meager, dusty landscape, the placid buffalo grazing nearby, embodying a simple, resilient existence that suddenly felt impossibly distant from their own spiraling chaos. You're probably like these buffaloes now. Just trying to pick up every little bit to eat. The imagery was poignant, a stark comparison of their grand aspirations with their current, desperate reality. It's okay, Mom. I'll go find my friend to get money for you. Hang, clinging to a thread of defiance, vowed to confront the scammer again. "I've been tricked. What else can I get money from? I haven't been to the house yet. I know where the house is. That house must have tricked me into taking money." Her mother's mind was reeling, a desperate attempt to reconcile the lies with the vanishing truth. The realization that the very notion of the friend's house was a deception was a final, crushing blow. If they've collected a lot of money, they won't go anywhere. It's not here. The more I talk, the more it hurts. I can't breathe. Her mother's voice faded, consumed by a pain that was both physical and emotional. The sheer scale of the scam, the implication that they were not the only victims, began to dawn on him. This wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a systemic exploitation, preying on the hopes and vulnerabilities of an entire community. The cultural expectation of trust within a close-knit village had been weaponized against them, leaving a gaping wound in its wake. The idea of the scammer simply disappearing, taking their collective savings, was an unbearable truth. The road, usually a familiar ribbon connecting their small world, now felt like an endless, desolate stretch. As they continued their weary journey, a figure emerged in the distance, growing steadily larger with each heavy step they took. Hang's mother gasped, her eyes widening in recognition. "It looks like Uncle Tien, right?" "Oh, is it Uncle Tien?" The voice was a choked whisper, a fresh wave of panic washing over her. Uncle Tien, their neighbor, the man from whom she had borrowed money in her desperate attempt to salvage their situation, was now upon them. His presence, once a source of communal comfort, now represented another layer of their unraveling. His face, usually gruff but predictable, was etched with a mixture of anger and concern. Uncle Tien strode towards them, his initial surprise at seeing them quickly giving way to an exasperated urgency. "Uncle Tien, where did you go? I went down to your house to look for you but I couldn't find you anywhere." His voice carried the weight of frustration, a man whose patience was clearly wearing thin. "You went down to your house?" "Yes." Hang's mother could only nod, her heart hammering against her ribs. The facade of calm she had tried to maintain shattered, revealing the raw fear beneath. "I went down to your house to ask for the money you borrowed from me the other day. You said you would take it back to me in 2 days so I could import goods to sell, but it's been 7 to 8 days now and I haven't seen you take the money back to me yet." His words were a direct confrontation, cutting through the thin veil of their evasions. A desperate, almost theatrical, attempt at denial sprang from her mother's lips. "Uncle, can I borrow money?" It was a pathetic plea, an attempt to feign forgetfulness, to somehow reset the clock and escape the obligation. Uncle Tien, however, was not easily fooled. "Oh, it's funny, isn't it? That day, you clearly borrowed money from me and you said you'd pay me back in 2 days. My house even has a camera recording it there. It was exactly the 25th. It's been 7 to 8 days now." His voice hardened, a steely edge appearing. He wasn't just relying on memory, he had evidence, a digital timestamp of their transaction. This meticulousness was a sign of a shift in village dynamics, where informal loans were increasingly formalized, reflecting a growing distrust and the need for accountability. The camera recording, a subtle intrusion of modernity into their traditional community, underscored the erosion of pure trust. "You forgot. You probably didn't get the loan." Her mother tried again, a feeble attempt to rewrite history. "Why are you saying that now? That day, you clearly said you borrowed money from me for 2 days and then you'd pay me back with interest so I could get money to buy goods." Uncle Tien's voice rose, a clear warning. "But it's been 7 to 8 days now. Now I come back to ask you, and you say that again. Otherwise, I'll take you to the police now." The threat was clear, unequivocal. The mention of the police, a symbol of external authority, sent a shiver down Hang's spine. For a community that prided itself on resolving matters internally, Recourse to law enforcement was a grave step, signaling a complete breakdown of trust and social fabric. It also carried a heavy stigma, a public acknowledgement of failure and discord. "Let me think about it. It seems like you didn't get the loan." Her mother persisted, her denial becoming increasingly desperate. Uncle Tien scoffed, his patience finally snapping. "Now you say that. I have evidence at home. I have a camera, I recorded it there. I also recorded the date you borrowed money and how much you borrowed there." The concrete evidence made her mother's denials futile, trapping her in an undeniable truth. "Now, don't be so fickle like that. Are you planning to default on your debt to me? You have to remember that your son is working in the police force." The veiled threat, invoking the son's official position, was a powerful deterrent, a stark reminder of the social and professional ramifications of her actions. This wasn't just about money, it was about public image, about the honor of a family, particularly when one member held a position of authority. Such an accusation could unravel not just the mother's reputation, but cast a shadow on her son's career. "When you say that, I don't agree with your behavior. I trust you so much that I let you borrow it. You said you would pay back the principal and the loan in 2 days, but now you say that." Uncle Tien's words were laced with disappointment, the sting of betrayal evident. The loan had been an act of goodwill, a gesture of community support, now shattered by this apparent evasion. "If you don't agree to borrow like this, I won't agree. Otherwise, I'll take you to the ward." He reiterated his threat, now specifying the local administrative body, the place where disputes were formally settled. "Don't do that. Don't report to the police." "Now I remember." The fear of official intervention finally broke through her mother's stubborn denial. The reality of public humiliation, of her troubles being aired in a formal setting, was too much to bear. "It's good that you remember. You probably borrowed 10 million from me, right?" Uncle Tien stated, his tone firm. "That's right." Her mother confirmed, the fight draining from her. Hang, standing by, her own mind reeling, could only ask, "When did Mom borrow money?" Her mother's gaze fell, a mixture of shame and despair. "It's because of you. At that time, you told Mom to borrow money to invest. Now the investment is gone." The blame, a tangible entity, shifted and settled between them once more. The daughter's face paled, the weight of her inadvertent role in this new debt crushing her. The investment scam had not only devoured their savings but had forced them into a further web of informal debt, creating a ripple effect of financial instability and social strain. This illustrated how a single act of deception could destabilize an entire family's economic and social standing. "So Mom hasn't paid you back yet?" "No, Mom didn't pay. Mom borrowed and forgot, so she doesn't remember. She borrowed as much money as she could, so she let me invest it all. Now Mom is penniless." The admission was a raw wound, exposing the extent of their devastation. Uncle Tien, hearing this, softened slightly, his immediate anger tempered by the raw vulnerability before him. "Now I don't need the interest anymore, I just need my principal. I don't need the interest anymore." It was a small concession, a gesture of unexpected empathy, yet it still demanded an immediate, impossible solution. "Now you have to find money to pay me right now. I don't have money to import goods." His own livelihood was at stake, his business relying on the swift return of capital. The mother, despite her exhaustion, found a flicker of defiance. "It's because of you. If you didn't tell Mom to find money to invest, Mom would still have a lot of money." The blame, momentarily deflected, found a new target in Hang. "Why?" "Because of you, you don't know. You kept telling Mom to invest, so Mom would have invested it all." Her voice, though weak, carried the sting of desperate accusation. Uncle Tien, weary of their internal strife, cut in sharply. "Now I won't argue anymore. When you get home you'll just find money to send me. Now I don't know what you and your mother invested the money in. I don't need to know. His focus was singular, the return of his principal. The intricacies of their scam were irrelevant to his immediate needs. If you don't find money to send me, I'll have to take you to the police station, that's all. The threat, once a vague possibility, now loomed large, cold and inescapable. Okay. Take it easy. Wait for me. Hank pleaded, desperately trying to buy time, to calm the escalating tension. I'll wait for you, until when? Now I don't believe you anymore. You lied to me. You said you'd pay back both principal and interest in 2 days. But how many days has it been? It's been almost half a month and you haven't lied to me yet. Now I don't believe you. Uncle Tien's trust had been irrevocably broken, replaced by a deep-seated suspicion. You've made me lose trust in you. I also thought it was a matter of neighborhood, so I lent you some money. I didn't think you would do that. You said you couldn't borrow from me. I'm so scared. His words reflected the profound social impact of their actions. In a close-knit community, trust was the bedrock of social exchange. It's